The summons came on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic Tuesday, no alarms, no flashing lights. Just a short message delivered to Ambassador Neera Cass's personal terminal, stamped with the Council's official seal, requesting her presence at the deliberation hall aboard Varath Station in 3 hours. She read it twice. She set it down. She poured herself a glass of water and finished it before she called anyone. The deliberation hall was designed to make visitors feel small. That was not an accident. The ceiling stretched 30 meters above the floor, and the council seats were arranged in a steep arc that looked down at whoever stood at the center podium. Cass had been inside this room 11 times over her 8-year posting. She had learned to walk to the center table slowly. Rushing made it look like the room was working. There were 9 council representatives seated above her when she arrived. Admiral Breath sat at the far end of the arc, in the military observer's chair. He was not a diplomat. His presence told her everything before anyone spoke. The lead representative, a Velhari elder named Suze, read the charge without looking up from his data slate. Humanity had violated Article 7 of the Armament Accords. Specifically, the development of weapons-grade technology in categories not approved by the Council's classification board. The evidence had been gathered over 18 months. The Council had determined the violation was deliberate and sustained. The prescribed remedy was fleet dissolution, mandatory inspection of all human shipyards and research stations, and a temporary freeze on Earth's voting rights within the body. Breath said nothing. He watched Cass. She waited until Suze finished. Then she said, "May I see the specific list of violations?" Suze passed a data chip across the table. She plugged it into her reader. The document was 43 pages. She read it, not skimmed. Read it. The council waited. Breath's fingers moved once against the arm of his chair, then stopped. When she finished, she set the reader down. "Earth will provide a formal response within 24 hours, she said. Suze looked at her over the rim of his slate. The window for compliance is 72 hours from this session. If Earth has not begun the dissolution process by then, a blockade will be imposed. Understood, Cass said. 24 hours for our response. She stood, gathered her reader, and walked out, not fast, not slow. The corridor outside the hall was empty. She moved to a side passage and stopped in a small alcove near the ventilation panel. She pulled out her personal communicator, not the diplomatic-grade device, the one registered to Council systems. The other one. She entered a 12-digit code and opened a channel on a frequency that the station's passive sensors were not calibrated to detect. It took 4 seconds to connect. They moved, she said. Article 7, full package, 72 hours. The voice on the other end was quiet for a moment. Director Adan Reyes had a habit of silence that most people found unsettling. Cass had worked with him long enough to know that the silence meant he was not surprised. He was simply making sure. The fleet violation charge, he said, not the research clause. Article 7, weapons-grade development outside approved categories. Another pause. She could hear something faint in the background, the low hum of the bunker's air system. He had been at his desk for hours already. Did they specify which technology? No, the list says kinetic propulsion research exceeding permitted thresholds and unauthorized spatial displacement testing. They know something, not everything. How did Breath look? Cass thought about it. Confident, not nervous confident, the kind that comes from not knowing what he doesn't know. Reyes said, "That was all." She waited. 24 hours is enough, he said finally. You bought us what we needed. Go back to your quarters, stay in the station. Don't push back, don't negotiate further tonight. And the response? I'll handle the response. She almost asked the next question. She stopped herself. She had known Reyes for 14 years. She had known for most of that time that there was a layer of the defense program she was not briefed on, not because he didn't trust her, because he didn't want her to have to perform ignorance in front of the council. Real ignorance was cleaner. "All right," she said. "Nira," his voice was steady, "you did well." She closed the channel. In the bunker beneath Geneva, Reyes sat in the low light of his operations room and looked at the wall display for a long moment. The Council's formation data was already coming in on the passive feeds, 60 warships, staging beyond the Verath system, positioned for a blockade that was never meant to be temporary. He had a folder on his desk. He had carried a version of it for 30 years, updated it every few months, hoped he would never need to open it, and known that one day he would. He opened it. He found the contact number for the EDS Iron Meridian and picked up his secure line. "Tell Osai to move," he said. 30 years ago, a 22-year-old physicist named Paul Adara sat in a government committee room in Nairobi and told a panel of 12 people that humanity was going to lose a war it had not yet been declared in. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody called her wrong. One of the 12 people in the room was a mid-level defense analyst named Adan Reyes, 31 years old, 3 weeks into a new posting, still learning which hallways to use. He listened. He took notes. He asked one question when she finished. "How long to build it?" She said 30 years, if they started immediately and never stopped. He looked at his notes, then he looked at her. "What do you need?" That was the beginning. Now Reyes stood at the center of his operations room beneath Geneva, facing a table of 7 people who all knew most of the story but were about to hear the rest of it. Outside, it was raining. Inside, the air was the same recycled coolness it always was. He did not use a presentation, he just talked. The armament accords, he explained, prohibited 3 categories of weapons: directed energy systems above a certain threshold, biological and chemical agents, and missile warheads exceeding a set yield. The treaty language was written 400 years ago by the founding council species. It was thorough. It was also specific, and specificity in legal documents creates edges. Kinetic launch systems were not listed, not because the council had missed them, because every species that had tried to build a viable railgun for ship combat had failed. The physics was brutal. Getting a projectile to speeds where it could punch through modern shielding required energies that destroyed the launch mechanism. It was a known dead end. The council had not bothered to ban a weapon nobody could build. Paul Adara had spent 30 years proving that assumption wrong. The solution was not one breakthrough. It was 40 smaller ones stacked, new magnetic containment materials, a staged acceleration chamber that distributed the energy load across 11 sequential sections instead of 1, a targeting system that compensated for relativistic drift in real time, and then, separately, the teleportation array, which she had designed first, actually, and which had always been the stranger of the 2 problems. "The array doesn't move the ship through space," Reyes said. "It removes the ship from one location and reinserts it at another. The travel time is effectively 0. No acceleration curve. No visible approach vector. You are simply not there, and then you are." One of the 7 people at the table, a general named Fausto, asked the obvious question. "How large is the window? How long does the insertion take?" "Under a second," Reyes said. "From outside the ship you would see empty space and then a warship. There is no in-between." Fausto was quiet for a moment, and the council has no idea. They suspect something. The charge is weapons-grade development outside approved categories. They named kinetic propulsion and spatial displacement, but naming a thing and understanding it are different problems. He let that sit for a moment, then moved on. Across the solar system, the EDS Iron Meridian had been sitting dark at the outer edge of the system for 6 days. No active transponder, no emissions above baseline. A ship running cold in deep space was invisible to everything the Council used for passive surveillance, and the Council had no active sensor net this far from Verath. Captain Dara Os received the activation order at 3:40 ship time. She read it once. She called her senior staff to the briefing room. There were 5 of them around the table. She did not give a speech. She pulled up the tactical display and pointed. Lieutenant Soren Valk ran the numbers without being asked. He was already running them. Range to the council formation, inside the array's maximum displacement distance. Fleet density, 60 ships in a tight staging configuration. Engagement window for a first strike teleport insertion. Clean. They're grouped, Valk said. They're staged for a blockade, not a fight. Formation spacing is designed to cover approach corridors, not to defend against something appearing inside the perimeter. Ose nodded. Paul. Chief Engineer Paul Adara's voice came through the intercom from 2 decks below. She had been in the engineering bay since before the order arrived. Array is stable. Core temp is nominal. I can hold this configuration for 18 hours without a performance drop. We may need less than 1, Osai said. I know, Adara said. I'll be ready. Osai dismissed the others. She stayed in the briefing room alone for a while, looking at the display. 60 ships, 400 years of authority. A 4th-century assumption that nothing could crack what the council had built. She thought about Adara, 22 years old in a committee room, telling a panel that humanity needed to start solving a problem that everyone else had given up on. 30 years of work stored in the ship, waiting. Osai turned off the display and went back to the bridge. She did not feel triumphant. She felt ready, which was a different thing. Admiral Breath did not sleep well. He told himself it was the recycled air on Verath Station, which had always been slightly too dry for his species' biology. He told himself it was not the image of Nira Cass reading that 43-page document without any visible change in her expression. He was awake at 200 when the decision came through from the council's inner chamber. The 72-hour window, the chamber decided, was a courtesy. And courtesies, someone had pointed out, were extended to equals. The question of whether humanity qualified was, at present, under review. The order was clean. Advance the fleet from staging position to full blockade configuration. Do it before the 24-hour diplomatic window expired. Show Earth that the Council's patience had limits. Breath dressed and went to the tactical center. He sent the order at 2:47. 60 warships, already in formation beyond the Verath system, received the instruction and began moving. 400 years of galactic law moving in one direction. Breath watched them on the display and felt, for the first time since the session, that he understood the situation again. He understood it completely until 3:11, when his communications officer knocked and said that Ambassador Cass was asking, very politely, whether the fleet movement was a procedural step or a change in the terms of the ultimatum. Tell her it is a procedural step, Breath said. She is also asking for a written confirmation of the remaining response window. Breath thought about this. Tell her the window is now 6 hours. He watched the officer leave and turned back to the display. The fleet was moving cleanly. This was the part of his work that made sense. Ships in formation, orders executing, the machinery of authority functioning as designed. Nira Cass, meanwhile, was sitting in a holding suite on the station's diplomatic level, drinking the tea a guard had brought her, and not appearing to be in any hurry at all. She had been escorted there 2 hours ago as a precautionary measure. She had thanked the guards by name. She had asked if they preferred standard temperature or warm hold for the beverage. When the 6-hour notice came through, she read it, set it aside, and sent a single encoded message on the secondary communicator. Not text, just a number. 11. 11 hours remaining. Aboard the Iron Meridian, Soren Valk picked up the Council fleet's movement on the long-range passive array at 3:18. He did not need to wake Osai. She was already on the bridge. They moved early, he said. By how much? He checked. 19 hours ahead of the original timeline. Osai looked at the display. The formation was dense and moving fast, 60 ships in tight configuration, running full power on their drives. No attempt at subtlety. They wanted to be seen. That was part of how a blockade worked. You made sure the other side watched you arrive. She called down to engineering. Paul, Council fleet is moving 19 hours ahead of schedule. Does that change anything on your end? Adara's answer came back in about 4 seconds. No, array is stable regardless of their schedule. My concern is array temperature during sustained cycling, and that clock started when we powered up, not when they started moving. We have a window. It is not affected by what they do. Good, Osa said. She looked at Valk. Track their approach rate. Tell me when they hit blockade distance. Yes, Captain. She stood at the tactical display and watched the 60 dots move. They were positioned for a show of force, not a fight. She could see it in their spacing. Wide enough to cover approach corridors. Too wide to provide mutual fire support if something appeared inside the perimeter. They were building a fence. They had not considered what to do if something came through the fence from the inside. At 4:41, Reyes received the updated fleet data from his monitoring team. He read the movement report. He looked at the timeline. He checked the 6-hour notice that Breath had sent to Cass. He sat with it for about 2 minutes. Then he picked up the secure line. Osai's voice answered on the first connection. She had been waiting. The Council has moved their fleet to blockade position ahead of schedule, Reyes said. The diplomatic window has been reduced to 6 hours. Ambassador Cass is currently in a holding suite on the station. Understood, Osai said. How is your array? Nominal, Adara says we're ready. Reyes was quiet for exactly 1 second. Captain Osai, he said, begin. Osai set down the line and looked at the display one more time. 60 ships. The Council's 400-year record of authority, arrayed in a tidy arc above an empty patch of space. She pressed the shipwide intercom. Her voice was level. All stations, this is the captain. We are beginning the engagement. Array team, you have authorization to spin to full power. Rail battery cruise, load sequence 1. Valk, calculate insertion coordinates for the center of their formation. Valk was already typing. Coordinates calculated, he said. Stand by, Osai said. The iron meridian powered up in the dark. 6 days of cold silence ending in a low electric hum that ran through the decks from bow to stern. Adara's voice came through calm and even. Array is at full power, ready on your mark. Center of the Council's formation was empty at 5:03. At 5:03, and less than 1 second, it was not. There was no flash, no energy discharge, no warning that anything was coming. One moment the sensor displays on 60 Council warships showed open space. The next moment they showed a human vessel 40 meters from the nearest ship in the formation, inside the perimeter, in a position that should have been impossible because nothing had entered the perimeter to get there. The tactical officer on Breath's command ship made a sound that was not a word. Breath said, "Fire everything." It took the formation 8 seconds to begin responding. 8 seconds for the ships to swivel weapons, cycle shields to combat mode, and achieve weapons lock on a target that was sitting still and not running. 8 seconds was, by Council fleet doctrine, an acceptable reaction time for surprise contact. It was not fast enough. Osai's voice on the iron meridian was flat. Rail battery, sequence 1. The first railgun fired, then the second, then all 8 in a staggered burst that lasted under 2 seconds. The rounds were solid tungsten cylinders, each 2 meters long, fired at a velocity close enough to light speed that the targeting computer had to calculate for relativistic effects on the round's own mass. The Council's shields had been tested against everything in 400 years of galactic warfare. Particle lances, plasma bolts, compressed mass warheads, focused graviton bursts. Every attack in the database had one thing in common. The shields had time to identify the incoming energy signature and modulate their frequency to absorb or deflect it. A tungsten cylinder moving at near light speed had no energy signature. It was just mass, moving very, very fast. The first round went through the forward shield of the nearest ship as if the shield were not there, because to a relativistic kinetic round, it effectively was not. The round did not explode. It did not need to. At that velocity, the energy released on impact was comparable to a nuclear detonation. The ship came apart in under a second. 3 more rounds found targets before the Council ships had finished swiveling their weapons. 4 ships, first volley, 2 seconds of firing. Breath screamed an order to scatter. The formation broke. Ships accelerated in different directions, trying to open distance, trying to get out of each other's fire arcs, trying to do anything other than remain in a tight cluster where a single round could travel through one hull and into the next. The iron meridian disappeared. Not destroyed, not running, gone. The sensors on every Council ship lost contact simultaneously, and for 0.8 seconds there was nothing to shoot at. Then the iron meridian reinserted, 112 kilometers to the formation's right flank, inside the scatter pattern of the fleeing ships, and fired again. 3 rounds, second volley. 3 more ships. The Council formation was no longer a formation. It was 41 ships moving in 41 directions, all of them broadcasting emergency signals on open frequencies, tactical officers talking over each other, drive output spiking as captains pushed their ships to maximum acceleration. Valk called the hits in the same tone he used to report navigation data. Confirmed kills, 7. Confirmed disabled, 2 additional. Remaining vessels are in full scatter. Array status, Osai said. Adara's voice from engineering. Nominal. Temperature is at 61% of the thermal ceiling. We have at least 4 more cycles before we need to throttle. We won't need 4 more, Osai said. She opened the fleet-wide channel. She did not speak in the Council's primary diplomatic language. She spoke in standard trade, which every species in the galaxy used for commercial exchange and which carried no formal authority markers. She spoke it like she was reading a maintenance report. This is Captain Dara Osai of the Earth Defense Ship Iron Meridian. The engagement is complete. No further vessels will be targeted provided all Council ships maintain current heading away from this position. Breath, if you are receiving this, you are not being pursued. Take your ships home. Inform the Council that Earth is waiting for a formal response through diplomatic channels. She closed the channel. On the bridge, nobody spoke for about 4 seconds. Then Valk exhaled and said, "Engagement time from array insertion to ceasefire call." He checked his display. 6 minutes and 40 seconds, he said. Osai looked at the display. The Council ships were still running. Their drive signatures were getting smaller as the distance opened. Behind them, in the space where the formation had been, 7 destroyed vessels were cooling in the dark. The debris cloud was already beginning to spread. She thought about Paul Adara, 22 years old, telling a committee that humanity needed to solve this problem before anyone else did. "Log the time," Osai said. "Logged," Valk said. "Paul," Osai said into the intercom. "Yes," Adara said. "It worked." A pause from engineering. Then, "I know, I've been watching the numbers. The second insertion was cleaner than the simulation projected. A beat. I want to run a calibration cycle on the array coils before we do anything else. There was minor thermal asymmetry in the left bank." Osai almost smiled. "Go ahead." She stood at the viewport and looked at the debris and the retreating ships and the empty space where 60 warships had been arranged in what the Council had believed was an unbreakable show of authority. Nobody had expected this. That had been the point. The report reached the council chamber at 6:12. Breth delivered it himself over a live channel from the bridge of his damaged flagship. His voice was controlled. The content was not. 19 ships confirmed destroyed, 2 disabled and drifting, 41 vessels in retreat, 0 confirmed losses on the human side. The engagement lasted less than 7 minutes. The human ship had fired twice and vanished between volleys. He gave the technical summary of what the rounds had done to the shields. He used the word irrelevant 3 times, which was not a word any Council fleet officer had ever used to describe shielding technology in an after-action report. When he finished, the chamber was quiet for a moment. Then it was very loud. The Velhari representative accused the Drath of withholding intelligence. The Drath representative accused the Velhari of approving the blockade without proper risk assessment. 2 species whose ambassadors rarely agreed on anything were suddenly in complete agreement that the current disaster was someone else's fault. The Sorathi delegation walked out of the session entirely and did not come back. Suze, the lead representative, called for order 4 times before the room settled. The question before this chamber, he said, is how this was possible. The council's chief historian, an old Drath named Vel, pulled up the armament accords on the main display. He was methodical about it. He found Article 7. He read it aloud. He read the weapons classification table. He pointed out very carefully what was and was not listed. Kinetic launch systems were not listed. Nobody in the chamber made a sound. They did not violate the accords, Vel said. Our own investigators spent 18 months building a case under Article 7, but Article 7 covers directed energy systems, biological agents, and warheads. A kinetic round is none of these things. The charge would not have survived review if the humans had chosen to contest it formally. He paused. They chose not to contest it. They chose to demonstrate it instead. Breth, still on the live channel, said nothing. One of the representatives asked whether the accords could simply be amended to cover kinetic systems. Vel looked at the chamber over his data slate. Amending the accords takes a full council vote. Adding a prohibition specifically targeting one species immediately after that species defeated our fleet would not be classified, under our own charter, as a treaty amendment. It would be classified as a declaration of military hostility, which we are not currently prepared to follow through on. Another silence. Breth closed his channel without being dismissed. In the holding suite on the station's diplomatic level, Nira Cass was finishing the last of her tea when the door opened. Not a guard this time. A junior council aide, young, visibly uncomfortable, holding a formal request scroll in both hands. The council requests your presence at the negotiating table at your earliest convenience, the aide said. Cass set down the cup. She stood. She straightened her jacket. Tell them 20 minutes, she said. I need to check my notes. She did not need to check her notes. She had the relevant documents memorized. But she had learned a long time ago that arriving exactly when summoned read as eagerness. 20 minutes read as professional. In Geneva, Reyes received the engagement confirmation at 6:34. He read the numbers. He put the report down. He sat for a moment. Outside it was still raining. He opened a separate terminal and accessed a document he had prepared in draft form for 3 years. It was a data packet. It contained the complete technical specifications for the Iron Meridian's railgun system and the teleportation array, materials, schematics, the physics, the engineering solutions, all of it. He sent it to the secure diplomatic mailbox of every species ambassador registered in the galactic network. Not the Council's distribution list. Every ambassador, individually addressed. He also attached a short cover note. It said, in standard trade, Earth has made this technology available for open licensing to any species that wishes to develop it. Inquiries should be directed to the Office of the Director, Earth Unified Defense Secretariat. His communications officer, who had been watching, said, "We're just giving it away." "No," Reyes said, "we're making it worthless to hoard." He closed the terminal. "The council can't be the only ones who understand what happened today. If they're the only ones who understand it, they control what it means. If everyone understands it, the only thing anyone can do is negotiate." He stood up and stretched. "How many responses so far?" he asked. The officer checked. 4 inquiries already. The Sorathi delegation is first, then 3 smaller species. Reyes nodded. The Sorathi had walked out of the council chamber. That was faster than he had expected. "Log all of them," he said. "We'll respond formally once Cass has the room." He poured water from the carafe on his desk and looked at the rain against the window for a moment. 30 years. Adara had been right about the timeline. She had been right about most things. He hoped she was running her calibration cycle on the array. She would want the data clean. Nira Cass walked into the negotiating chamber at 7:11 and immediately noticed 2 things. The first was that the seating arrangement had changed. The council representatives were no longer elevated above the center table. They were seated at the same level as the chair reserved for Earth's delegation, on the opposite side of a flat surface. Someone had made that decision in the last hour. It was a small thing. It was not a small thing. The second was that Breath was not in the room. She sat down. She placed a single data chip on the table in front of her. She did not plug it into anything yet. Suze opened the session by saying the council wished to discuss a path forward. He used the phrase mutual understanding. He used the phrase cooperative resolution. He did not use the phrase armament accords. Cass waited until he was finished. Then she said, "I'd like to start with something Earth prepared before this morning's events." She plugged in the chip. The room's main display populated with a document. It was titled Proposed Framework for Galactic Armament Review, 3rd Draft. "This has been in development for 22 years, she said. "The current version was updated 9 days ago." She walked them through it section by section. The framework replaced the existing Armament Accords Classification Board, a council-controlled body that had not added a new weapons category in 60 years, with a multi-species technical review panel, rotating membership, no single species holding veto rights on new submissions. Any species could flag a technology for review. Any species could submit a technology for open classification. Decisions required a 2/3 vote of the full panel. The Velhari representative asked, who would control the panel's secretariat. "It rotates," Cass said, "on a 5-year cycle by lottery from the full membership list excluding the previous holder." The draft representative asked about enforcement. "Collective," Cass said, "under the existing mutual defense articles which already apply to all council members. Nothing new there, just applied to the panel's decisions." Suze looked at the document for a long time. "And the human technologies, the kinetic systems, the displacement array." "Already in open distribution," Cass said, "as of approximately 40 minutes ago." A pause around the table. "We sent the full specifications to every species ambassador in the galactic network," she said. "Anyone who wants to build what we built has everything they need. We're also accepting licensing inquiries for any species that wants our engineering team's support." The draft representative said carefully, "Why would you do that?" Cass looked at him. "Because a technology that only one species has is a threat. A technology that everyone has is just a technology. We did not build this to rule anyone. We built it because we needed to be safe. The best way to stay safe is to make sure nobody has a reason to come after us in the first place." She let that sit. Then she said, "What Earth wants is what we've always wanted. Full membership, full rights, no inspections that don't apply equally to every other species in this body. No classification charges against technologies that are not listed in the documents we all signed." She folded her hands on the table. "We don't want to run anything. We want to be in the room." Breath had entered the room quietly during the last 2 minutes. He stood at the back, near the door, not sitting. He looked like a man trying to run calculations that kept coming out wrong. He said from the back of the room, "How many ships do you have?" It was not really a question. Cass looked at him. "Enough," she said. The vote took 2 hours and 11 minutes. Not unanimous. The Pelrath delegation abstained. 2 smaller species voted against. But the remaining 12 voted in favor of adopting the framework as a provisional charter, pending full review and ratification within 18 months. The motion passed. Cass sent one message, a single confirmation number. She did not write anything else. Aboard the Iron Meridian, Valk received the signal at 9:41 and read the confirmation number aloud. He had to read it twice because Adara was coming up the ladder from the engineering deck and had not heard the first reading. She stood in the hatchway with Grease on her left hand and listened to the second. Osai stood at the viewport. The debris from the council formation was still visible on long-range sensors, slowly spreading, getting harder to track as individual pieces. "We did what we came to do," she said. Nobody argued with that. She pressed the intercom. Navigation set course for Earth, standard transit speed. The Iron Meridian turned. Its drive engaged with a low, steady pulse. The debris field fell behind. The stars ahead were unchanged, the same stars that had been there 30 years ago when Paul Adara had stood in a committee room and told 12 people what was coming. The same stars that had watched humanity work in silence while the council looked elsewhere. The ship moved into them. Behind it, in the space where authority had arranged itself into 60 ships and found that 400 years of precedent was not the same as being right, the wreckage drifted in the dark, cooling, spreading, no longer anyone's certainty. It was just debris now. Earth was going home.